In a cradle of rolling hills and drowsy meadows, a small stone tower rose above the trees. Sun warmed the stones, and a wide window faced fields that seemed dusted with gold. The village below moved slowly, like mornings arriving as old friends. In that tower lived Rapunzel. Her hair fell in long, gleaming ribbons that caught the dawn and turned it into honey. She kept the tower like a treasured book. Shelves held paintings of places she dreamed, and small carved animals sat on the sill. Birds came to the wide window ledge. Rapunzel hummed and brushed her hair with patient hands. She smiled. Rapunzel kept her home with small, careful rituals. She filled shelves with painted places she had only imagined. She carved little wooden animals with steady fingers and pressed wildflower petals into tiny bouquets. Each morning she stretched slowly, like waking a sleeping thing. Her hands found her hair, and she brushed it with measured patience. The brush moved like a boat over calm water. Birds landed on the wide window ledge and pecked at crumbs while she hummed a tune. That tune always ended in the same soft smile. Her window looked out over fields that shimmered. Days passed in the quiet order she made, each task a small promise kept to herself. Not far beyond the whispering forest lived Prince Elian. He liked dusty paths and the sound of wind in leaves more than court halls. He rode with a light saddle and a light heart. He carried a small wooden flute and maps filled with curious detours. Elian let music point his way. When a tune made him stop, he trusted the world had chosen him to listen. He followed sounds and wandered down lanes that bent with surprises. He kept a faded scarf with a stitched compass tucked at his belt and a small carved flute slung on its cord. He loved the open road and the slow, honest work of finding small, good things. One late afternoon, when light folded into long shadows, Elian heard a voice. It threaded the trees with a delicate melody. The notes were simple and spun out like ribbons. They invited him without demand. He followed the sound, weaving between trunks and stepping over moss that shivered underfoot. At the edge of a small clearing, he saw a stone tower rising above the trees. In the wide window sat Rapunzel, brushing her hair like a long, gentle story. She looked up, and for a moment everything settled into a careful wonder. Her hand paused mid-stroke, and the birds seemed to hold their breath. Elian answered softly, because the world felt gentle and worth speaking to. They introduced themselves in a quiet, open way. Elian spoke of narrow paths and curious stones. Rapunzel told him how the moon looked from the tower. Their words fell into a gentle rhythm, each line a small step together. Elian came back the next day with a basket of fruit and a book of simple maps. He played a tune on his flute, and Rapunzel hummed back. The forest animals gathered like an audience. Rabbits sat in a straight line, and a fox watched from the ferns with bright, curious eyes. Days passed like soft feathers as their friendship grew. Each visit felt like a new page they turned slowly, with care. Days slipped by, soft as feathers. Rapunzel spoke of places she wanted to see, lanterns floating like tidy moons, markets full of bright cloth, and a sea that sighed at the shore. Her fingers traced each place in the air, as if naming a recipe. Elian listened and promised in a warm, steady way. He said, "One day you will see them. Slowly, if you like. We will take our time." He never pushed. He planned instead, measuring possibilities like breadcrumbs and maps. Their plans were small tests of trust. Each promise was a careful stitch, and Rapunzel felt the path ahead grow a little clearer with each soft step. There was an unease tucked into Rapunzel's chest, like a small stone. She had known the tower a long time, and the world felt big and strange. Her fear did not roar. It whispered practical what-ifs. What if she got turned around, or people pushed, or she forgot how to be small? She told Elian in the quiet hours. He never tried to rush her. Instead, he showed up with plans. They measured short trips, down to the field and back, across the brook and back. Rapunzel braided her hair into a rope of careful knots and looped tiny flowers through it to remember the window she had left. The first real test came on a misty night with sudden rain. The little stream they needed to cross swelled into a dark, fast ribbon. The stepping stones were gone. Elian looked at the water and at the scattered branches. He made a plan in a calm voice. He gathered buoyant logs and showed Rapunzel how to lash them with her braided hair and strips of vine. She tied the knots she had practiced. Ember, the fox, darted along the reeds and kept watch with bright, judging eyes. Together they pushed the small raft into the current. Rapunzel held the rope with both hands and breathed in a slow, steady rhythm. When they reached the opposite bank, the raft bumped the muddy edge. Rapunzel's wet shoes sank, and she laughed a small surprise sound like new bread. Ember darted around the reeds, nose twitching. That night, they sat by a small fire under a willow and dried their clothes. The air smelled of wet earth and the quiet of possible things. Rapunzel showed her watercolor story, and Elian answered with a tune on his flute. The moon climbed kind and indifferent above them. Rapunzel felt something uncoil inside her. It was not the end of fear, but a new muscle of trust, built from planning, listening, and the steady company of another. Their travels stitched together like a slow, bright seam. They wandered through hamlets where children reached out to run fingers through Rapunzel's long hair, as if feeling a story. They ate candied chestnuts under market awnings and watched lanterns float up into gentle dark. When crowds surged, Elian stood close, and Rapunzel tucked her fingers into the pocket at his waist. When streets curved in ways she did not expect, she pulled out a small sketch and drew her path. She folded the map into her breast pocket and felt steadier. Ember trotted nearby, always alert. People began to look at Rapunzel differently, as someone who could make order out of small phrase. That night, the town held a small festival with lanterns hung like gentle stars. Crowds moved slow and warm. A child slipped free from an adult and froze. Faces around blurred. Rapunzel saw the fear as plainly as she saw table candles. She stepped forward without a shout. She knelt and picked up a bright ribbon on the ground and held it out. Then she began to hum a soft travel song she had learned while mapping roads and rivers. The child's eyes widened, and he reached for the ribbon. Others watched and then followed the small sound. Ember the fox sat nearby, tail curled, head tilted. The crowd eased, and a hush became a small, gathered smile. After the festival, people began to see Rapunzel in a new light. They no longer spoke of the tower as a single story. News reached the palace in calm steps. The king and queen were curious rather than loud. They sent a quiet invitation. Rapunzel and Elian walked into the great hall with soft shoes and slower breaths. They found a chair by a wide window that faced the meadow. The court hung her paintings along a long gallery. They set small shelves for her carved toys. Children came to sit at her feet like little intent flowers, asking gentle questions. Ember slipped in too and found a warm sun patch on the palace floor. Nights became the true measure of their change. They would lie on quilts with city sounds thin and far away. They spoke of small plans and hummed the last notes until the room quieted. Rapunzel traced Elian's sleeve, and he pointed out simple constellations. Sometimes they planned short pilgrimages to see a shepherd's odd flock. Ember slept at the foot of Rapunzel's chair and dreamed fox dreams. Their work was not loud. It was small and steady. Maps folded into pockets, toys carved between visits, a song learned to calm a child. The world stayed large and messy, but Rapunzel carried gentleness like a small map. Morning found her patient and sure, hair catching light like warm honey.